Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm actually saying welcome back to us. It's the Presence Posse, and we have gathered once again to speak to you about all things presence. We've taken a long summer hiatus, and we're back. So I would like to welcome Dr. Fred Blum, Jan Hart, Bobby Cobb, and of course, me, Miriam Siegel. I remembered what my name is. That's a good thing. Today's topic is presence and process. So, who wants to start by saying something about process?
Well, I'll jump in because I was thinking about this from a couple of different angles. I was thinking about the process that we process or processes that we use to become more present. And by present, I mean more fully experiencing the moment that is unfolding right in our presence. But I was also thinking about process from the standpoint that very often we get lost in a process, and that so much of our daily life is really a process. We've had 3 months off, and I effortlessly got back into my Presence Posse process for Monday morning. I went back to doing all of the things. I had my eye on the timer there, which I haven't been doing all summer. So, several different ways that we can approach it and look at it occurred to me. Some ways for getting more present, but in some cases, process can also be the enemy of just living life on autopilot. They say that we think 80,000 thoughts a day, and the cynic says 7,000 or 79,995 are the same that we thought yesterday and the day before and the day before that. So it can be the enemy of being fully present from a mindfulness standpoint.
That's really interesting, Bobby, because when I looked at the topic, and I didn't look at it until about an hour ago, if I'm honest, and I was kind of going, wonder what that all means. I wonder who picked this topic and what they had in their head. Because nothing immediately sprung to mind for me, and then all sorts of things started coming to mind, including some of what you spoke about. But something else that occurred to me was process, as in, procedures and steps, and, a lot of people in workplaces are working in processes and spend all day working a process, sometimes repeatedly. And the difference that presence can make, in terms of if you're present to that process or if you just put the whole thing on autopilot. And the outputs can be very different depending on the level of presence that people bring to a process. So that's just another dimension. But they're all relevant. Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I'll throw one in.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a distinction I learned years ago called process versus content. And so process, and it's kind of like where your attention is. So process is kind of just your attention on being, as Bobby said, on just the unfolding of life. And content is the stuff in your life, your thoughts, what other people are saying, the stuff that's happening, or even your identity, like that's all part of the content. So, there's like all the stuff that's happening in the space. That's all the content. And then there's the space itself, which is process, at least the way it was described many years ago to me.
I like that. The world of 10,000 things could be the content.
That's right. 10,001 probably.
There you go.
Yeah. I think you left one out.
and the process is to, to be present to it all. I love that. It's really good,
Mm.
Fred. Yeah.
Yeah, I read an interesting article or snippet from something. I often use the idea of a river when I'm talking to people about being present and being aware and being mindful, and just imagine yourself sitting on a riverbank and just being a witness to everything that flows by. And the exercise, as I've delivered it, has always been to just notice that things arise and they fade away, just like a stick coming down the river stream. It comes into view, it's in view, and then it goes out of view. The thing that I read this weekend that was really cool and was a cool flip for me was this author was describing the being, the flow of the river. And don't imagine that you are viewing the river from the bank. Rather, imagine that you are the river. And as you're flowing, there are fish that you can see that are occurring inside of you. There's pebbles on the bottom of the river. There's big rocks and limbs that you have to negotiate around and everything. And it was it literally was the process. It was a process to invite you to look at the unfolding of life from a little bit of a different perspective. And in a way, I think that's kind of what an aha moment is. If you think of an aha moment at its essence, you've been staring at this problem metaphorically and figuratively in a certain way, but then you get up and you go do and something else. And now all of a sudden you just look at it a little bit differently. Same problem, different perspective. And all of a sudden that creates space for insight to occur and for aha moments and intuition to come in.
That's really cool. A little twist of the kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
It's a very
Mm.
expressive arts way of looking at things. I'm the psychotherapist side of the whole thing. And one of the things we do working with expressive arts is being something. So if we are in psychodrama, for example, we are the other person. We take on the role of the other person and we be that person to experience what it's like to be them. And it's amazing what kind of magic can happen. If we've painted something, we can choose something in a painting, a figure in a painting, and then we change places with that, whatever it is, and we are, and we're in a state of being with that figure. And what is that figure revealing for us? We have a chance to be in that space and see things from another perspective. So it's not just witnessing, it is actually being. And it is an amazing experience to experience life from that perspective. It can be a word, it can be a poem, it can be a figure, it can be something from clay. It doesn't matter, or a role, a person. And it's very helpful in conflict, for example, or people who have difficulty with dissociation. They don't have to, they can go into something that's safe and be that and see what that's like, taste it, feel it, and then come out of it and then become themselves, having taken with them something from that perspective. And that's part of process for me, is this becoming being, like coming into being is a process as well. Going from not being to being, that's also a process. And you can even be in connection with the process of becoming into being. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You look like you're all very thoughtful now.
Except for me, who has
Bobby,
unfortunately
you're
been
frozen.
frozen in a It's pictures like this that give people the impression that I'm always talking.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe try to
No,
go up.
I'm sure he'll be back. Yeah.
He'll be back.
Yeah. You know, I hear people a lot, and I say it myself, you know, trusting in the process of life and allowing life to unfold in whatever way it does and being with that. And it sounds, what you've just described, Miriam, sounds like a very,
Yeah.
on a micro level, specific version of that. And what Bobby talked about seemed to be the macro version of that. And there's a whole spectrum in the middle, because it's all life, it's all life unfolding.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what else is there to say after that, right?
yeah.
I mean, we'll probably think of something, but it's all life unfolding. You know, I mean, and in life, where, you know, the extent to which we can be present with just that unfolding, I think that, I don't know that it gets a lot better than that.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
just
It,
being
no,
here.
yeah. It's a joy. Just life itself is such a gift. Yeah, you know, listening to Bobby, something occurred to me, you know, like being the observer, sitting on the riverbank, looking at the river flowing, and then
Mhm.
taking the perspective of being the river. And Sydney Banks used to say that as humans, we can be both the observer and the participant.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
presence very much comes into play if you want to straddle both.
Well, you know, and Jesus said we are both in the world and not
And
of the
of it.
world,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and that's it's all really pointing to the same thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. Consciousness.
Mhm.
Yeah. Being awake for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about when I think of process and as I listen to you, uh, this idea of allowing. It's not, and I'm sort of been focusing on this as well. And in a week's time, I'm going to be going to a retreat with Eckhart Tolle and Kim Eng. They're going to be in Norway for several
That's right.
days, and this whole idea of resistance and not resistance. So
Mm.
with the topic of like and being in life and even aware of life and in life, there's this process of allowing. So to not resist, just allow every moment, accept every moment. And also a process of learning to do that. Because we all work, as far as I know, with people who are developing. We support them in some sort of development, generally speaking, whether it's to learn to be because they're not being, or they're in one place and they want to get to another place. And I green Bobby. And yeah, it just had me thinking of that process of allowing the moment and being with allowing. That in itself is a process. And being in the moment, it's like the river as well. It's like once you are the river, you just flow with every moment. Every moment is movement. There's no static moment.
And yet
If
we
that
have the
makes any
power.
sense at all. Go ahead.
It does. And we have the power, with the power of thought, we can create a dam against that flow of that river anytime we want.
Why would we want to, Jan?
But we do, and that's where we get into trouble, and that's where we are suffering, and yeah, it's allowing, like, you know, as you say, that's all resistance is putting up that dam with our thinking and not allowing the river of life to flow
Hmm.
and our innate well-being to flow. You know, our wisdom and our resilience and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a process question for you guys. When you notice that, when you notice that you're resisting and that you're just putting up these mental blocks and you're like, no, 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 you cannot say this, or I don't want the conversation to go, or I can't believe this is happening, where you just feel yourself resisting to what is happening right now. Do you have a process that you either use personally or that you find very effective in teaching the folks that you're having these conversations with to use that as either a pattern interrupter, a teaching tool, or as a doorway to get back into fully embracing the moment? Do you guys have a favorite process or technique that you use that has served you or your clients well?
Self-pity mostly.
Or join them in their wallowing.
Yeah, right. That's like the secret technique that they only teach you when you like pay the extra membership fee.
The advanced class.
Right.
But we've talked about that a lot. I think self-pity was a good comment, actually, because we've talked often on the Posse about using feelings as a way to guide you to presence. And I'm watching everybody nod, like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a handrail,
exactly.
Right. The difference between feelings as an indication of what is real or not, and feelings as an indication of my experience of being in the world right now. And I think a lot of people really don't know that there is a difference. Like, my feelings are not necessarily telling me anything about what's really going on out there. My feelings are telling me about how I'm interpreting it, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The big
Not what's going on
misunderstanding.
in here.
Yeah. What's my experience of being in the world right now? And so self-pity, that's something I often notice people, and I don't think people understand that that's what it is. I think a lot of times I like self-pity, which is going to maybe sound a bit weird, but I like self-pity because it's kind of self-love. It's just that it's not that.
Right? So what is it?
Yeah, it's like self-pity is giving myself attention, giving myself care, right? When I feel sorry for myself, it's like the focus is on me and poor me, and I just really need but me and me and me. And that is an indication that I, at least in a twisted sort of way, I'm giving myself some sort of care because I may not be able to get it from outside of me. And that understanding of it becomes self-pity is not a bad thing. And it's good to notice that that's what we're doing, because then we can invite, well, if I need a hug or if I need something else, what is that? Instead of staying into self-pity and making life miserable, because self-pity is not the same as self-love. So what is love? Right.
Well, I just thought of an interesting, at least I think it's interesting way of conceptualizing this. First of all, I think it's hilarious that silly joke has now become a topic of discussion, but I love that.
It's the presence Posse.
If we would agree, I think that self-pity is just one of many like expressions of the ego, right? Just one of any number. Then what if the ego was kind of like a lens that in some way, large or small, distorts the experience of just pure being? So like who we are is pure being, true self, whatever we want to call it. And then that true self has to express through this lens of ego. And so what you said, Miriam, you said something about self-pity is self-love. Well, yeah, because it's all love, but it gets distorted into a lens of, whatever, self-pity, anger, whatever the ego is caught in that moment. So there's only, being. Love is just a synonym for being to me. So whatever it looks like, whatever the content looks like, the feeling, the experience, it's just really love in disguise.
And it's still guidance.
Yeah, right. Of course.
It's still pointing you back inside. And it's the best love you can show yourself in that moment if you're wallowing in self-pity.
And if you could be present with it,
yeah,
then it's just data.
Yeah.
Like I think of it as a part of ourselves that, in that moment, there's like an experience that it's a part of ourselves that we have rejected or denied in some way, that if we could just sit with it for a moment or a few moments, then it's like welcoming that part home.
Yeah,
and that's the allowing piece, isn't it? We started talking about resistance and allowance, but, embracing it and allowing it to come back into the whole and back into oneness and bringing it home is the healing part. And, it looks more and more like whatever is arising in the moment for myself or anybody else. It's arriving in this moment because this is the moment for it to arise and to be healed if I can be with it. Whatever it is, if it's an uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, in hypnosis, we start with the understanding that there is just one and everything is whole and we're not broken and we don't need to be fixed. However, in the work, as we're working with a client, we will very often dig down more deeply into different parts of the whole and ask that question, as that self-pity arises, there's a world of things that we could do with it. We can just sit with it and see where it goes and experience it and just feel what that is like. We can reframe it and say, this is really just love in drag showing up in awareness right now. One of the things that we'll often do in hypnosis is to ask the client, what is that emotion attempting to tell you? It's got a message for you. It showed up here for a reason. What might that be? And ultimately, the goal of that is through that exploration, you kind of see, oh, this is just another part of the whole that is getting my attention right now and welcoming me back home again. But oftentimes we'll like go down and ask, what is that pain in your knee attempting to communicate to you? And it's a lot of times it's the reflective response that you would expect, but other times it just opens this door. It's like opening Pandora's box and everything's just suddenly flowing out sometimes.
I think if I can throw in a sort of a picture, presence practices or training or whatever, I think a lot of us grow up believing and experiencing the world as emotions. We see the world through emotions. So the emotions is a filter. So we're in pain, so the world is bad, or people are bad, or something hurts, the world is dangerous, it's scary, or whatever. Or somebody loves me, so I'm happy, so the world's a great place. So we use emotions as kind of filters, like glasses with different colors, so that's how we see the world in any given moment. Whereas my understanding more in presence practice and learning to become, like the process of becoming, coming into being, is emotions are more like signposts on a road, and they point you in a direction, and the road is actually leading to you now in a moment. So it's which signpost, what is the signpost pointing me to? Where is my awareness? Where can that emotion help my awareness notice what's going on? And then I can be in that moment or take off those glasses. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I mean, that.
Yeah. Thank you. You sound so surprised, Fred.
You know what it reminds me of, Miriam?
Finally.
And I heard somebody speak about this recently. I can't remember who. But when you go on Facebook and you're putting up a post, they have all these emojis for different feelings. You know, feeling blessed, feeling grateful, feeling happy, and all the little faces. And that's all that's going on for any of us at any moment in time, as we've picked up some pair of goggles and put on our feeling blessed goggles or feeling annoyed goggles or whatever goggles. And we can take that, as we were saying earlier, as information about what's going on in the world, or it's a signpost home. And knowing that it's a signpost pointing home is so helpful, just to know that. So many people don't, as you said yourself. It's huge.
Game changer.
Really,
and it generally looks like, you know, from our conditioning, it generally looks like and feels like our feelings are telling us about our circumstances.
Absolutely.
The reflexive thing is, and you can run this experiment if you're listening to the podcast. Next time you see a friend who looks unusually up or unusually down or just unusual in any way, just comment on it. Man, you look particularly happy today. What's going on? And what you'll notice is the response that you get back will almost always be talking about some external event that happens that they feel like was the catalyst. You know, their asshole boss got fired, or they got a windfall from a class action lawsuit that they didn't even know that they were participating in, and a check just showed up. You know, it'll be some sort of external event, as opposed to just realizing it's really more about how's the weather going on the inside, which then becomes a catalyst for us to go within and go, all right, what's going on? Why is this happening? And just start to pull the threads of self-exploration. It's a fun little hobby.
Yeah, that's actually cool.
Emotional crocheting.
It was such a good example because the sort of check in the mail kind of thing, where people they get some sort of windfall, they win the lottery, or a check shut up, or they got a sudden, you know, raise or bonus or something, and they're like, yay, life is wonderful, and they feel relieved, and they don't understand that the reason that they feel relieved or happy or whatever is not because the check came or the bonus came, but because they were unconsciously worrying about something. And then when the check showed up, they stopped worrying, and they attribute it to the check and not to their own projecting a problem into the future and then living. It's really, does that make sense? It's like they don't notice, or they don't realize they're conditioned to be in the past or the present, as you say often, Bobby, time traveling. So when the check comes, they think, oh, great, lifesaver. And I mean, it may be that it solves something, but the unconscious living in future worries that wouldn't happen, they actually aren't even there when in the present. There is no experience of worry. It just is what it is. I'm going to make an exception, though. I'm going to throw that in just really quickly, and that is, I always like to respect people who have experienced trauma, and especially extreme trauma, shock. And I've been looking more closely at this this last year, also because of my own recent experiences with it. Shock does something that makes it, without going into the science of it, and we don't have Malcolm here, difficult to take in the moment. It's like the brain is so overwhelmed. And so there's the respect when we're speaking about being. It's not necessarily possible when the brain is in a shock state. And to allow for just even recognizing that that is the case for you is being present to what is. So I just wanted to throw that in there. You may not be able to not be in past or future because the shock is so great. And I'm speaking also from recent experience. So having, done meditation and presence practices since I was a teenager, and being suddenly in a situation where nothing worked except being aware that I was in that situation. That's what was possible for me in the moment. So don't feel bad about if it's difficult for you. Just respect that that is what is right now, and that is being with what is right now. Sorry, just wanted to throw that in there.
Well,
You were going to say something? Actually, I'm not sorry. I just threw that in there because it felt important. I'm not sorry at all. I'm just being so Canadian. Sorry. Sorry, you were going to say something? I just said sorry.
Well, I'm not sure if any of you guys know my friend Garrett, who is he's a teacher of this kind of thing, and he's on Facebook and all that. But and he's worked with a lot of athletes, like professional athletes in different sports, and so he'll give the example of a soccer player. It could be any athlete who you see them when they score the goal, and you can see them running around the field celebrating and all that kind of thing. And his comment about that is that they don't really fully understand what that joy that they're feeling is about. So there's the obvious, and this is all legitimate. This is the in the world side. The in the world side says, I scored a goal. My team is winning. There's 50,000 people cheering for me, and all that stuff is legit. But the part that they don't recognize, or at least the way Garrett sees it and what he pointed out, is that for a moment, and this is similar to what you just said, Miriam, for a moment, they get to stop seeking. Like the ego is constantly seeking what a different teacher calls more, better, next. Like there's always something that, maybe this will, make me feel good about myself, or it'll hide my brokenness from the world, or whatever strategy the ego is employing. But it's always some kind of like the ego is in almost constant damage control, And so for the moment that goal is scored, and there's just nothing in that moment that they could want more than that. And so the seeking ends, and they experience for a moment the true freedom of having nothing to seek. But of course, because we misidentify it, and so we attribute all the happiness to the in the world temporal goal, how long does it last? And so we're back to seeking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant example.
I have another flavor of that, Fred. Along my own journey of coaching, I was doing NLP coaching for a number of years before I came across the principles and that. And at one point, I stopped. I basically turned my back on NLP and thought it's just tools, it's techniques, it's surface stuff, it's not important, it's not doing anything. And I just stopped using it. But what I came to see over time, as I deepened my own grounding of it, was the benefit and the use, as I see it now, of the various tools and techniques that are used, not just in NLP, but in any modality, is that it takes the person you're working with out of their head for a while, in terms of takes them away from whatever they're preoccupied with, whatever they're seeking or want to change. And they become focused on what they're doing in the moment with you. So they drop their thinking. And when they drop their thinking, that creates the conditions for the insight. It's not the tool or the technique. It's the fact that they fall out of their thinking while they're doing the technique with you.
And that creates a space.
Yeah.
For the insight to occur. I think that's why so many aha moments don't happen. It seems rare that we're sitting there working on something, and then suddenly it's like, eureka, we got it. The eureka happens when we're petting the dog, or washing the dishes, or taking a shower, or preparing the meal. And it's like, oh my gosh, I never looked at it that way before. And then boom, that thinking stops. It goes exactly back to what Fred's quoting with Garrett. And it's not true just of a soccer goal. If you've wanted to buy, you've been shopping for a new house, and you finally find the perfect one, the very first thing that is ceased is the search. I don't have to look anymore. I can just revel in this.
Mhm.
And then, something happens to bring us back to the seeking. And I think with the clients that I see, which, are tend to be high achievers, they are so conditioned to I forget what you said, Fred, but the good, better, next idea.
More better next.
Yeah. And we're so conditioned into the chasing of that feeling of the momentary automatic stopping of the seeking that we try to recreate it again, where we could just realize that that's really what is happening and start to pull on that thread a little bit and start to release some of our attachments to various things.
Whatever's happening, that's exactly right. Whatever's happening, that's it. Just like that's your teacher in this moment.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a process that we haven't mentioned yet, or at least I haven't heard it mentioned yet, and that is sex.
Sex.
Yeah.
Process.
Always back to sex with you, Miriam.
But in the context of presence and process, there is, for those people who have had at least good sex, because that's preferably what we're talking about, the ability, or the just sex in itself is a very present process. It's whatever bills you're worried about and whatever illnesses you have, and even pain. You can have incredible physical pain, but then sex shows up and the pain seems to disappear, or at least be quite reduced, or the worries go out the window because it's such a present activity to call it an activity. So there's this whole process of the building up to the whole foreplay, and then the actual act, and then the winding down afterwards, and then you're back to seeking, right? You're up and you're into daily life or whatever. But in that process of sex, it's very, very present, and a very special presence as well, because it really shuts out anything else going on, unless there's, of course, an emergency where people can snap out of it really quickly. And we often, I don't hear people talking a lot generally about sex when it comes to presence and understanding the moment, and even training presence. It's like, notice how present you are during sex. It's like, now, everything is right now. And that's, if you don't understand what we're talking about when it comes to presence and being now, that can really be a way in to understand what we mean. Because it's kind of hard to have at least good sex presence without being present to it. We are by nature drawn into the moment and the experience of it. And that can be a really welcome experience of now.
I have an interesting story around that.
Do
very
tell.
subject.
Of course you do, Bobby.
About
You have more than one.
Do we need to wait, let the kids leave the room first, or?
Yeah, well, yeah, there is a slight parental warning that you'll know when it comes up here. So I had a client like 2.5, 3 months ago call me up. They were a referral, and they were having problems getting pregnant, and they asked if hypnosis can help with that. And I know that it can. I've never done it before, so I let them understand that and told them that I would enthusiastically love to explore that with them if they were open to it, which they were. So they came in, and during the initial talk, all they're talking about is we've been trying to have a baby for like 1.5 years. And it just became the opposite of being present, because it was, they're taking temperatures, they're making Post-it notes of the ovulation day and time on the calendar. And, foreplay became, God, I hope this works, and, one of the most beautiful moments that two people can share became another effing task
Sure.
on their to-do list that had to get checked off at a specific time. And they were just going through that. And my pattern interrupt was to ask them, because they kept trying. I said, I almost feel like I need to bring Yoda into the proceedings. And they kind of laughed because they got the ref, do or do not. And the session that I did with them, which I got from an old book by a guy named Milton Erickson, who was kind of the godfather of modern medical hypnosis. And I basically just took his protocols, which was got them down into trance, got them to open their eyes and look at each other. And we revivified the moment of them falling in love, and when they realized that this was the one and the first time that they ever made love, and just recalled all of those moments together while they're in trance and looking in each other's eyes. And they were just lighting up. And I didn't and wouldn't, but I got the feeling that if I had have suggested take your clothes off and do it right here, they would have been they would have been willing to accept that suggestion. And I had told them, I said, this is kind of a shock treatment. And I said, are you guys ready for the shock? And they said, yes. And I said, your job for the next 30 days is just to fuck for fun. And they kind of laughed at that. I said, I don't want any calendars. I don't want any temperatures. I don't want any talk about babies or alternatives for the next 30 days. I just want you to look into each other's eyes like you are right now and let that emotion of fucking for fun arise within you. And, so off they went. And I kind of followed up, and we had a couple of texts, and it just kind of seemed like they were a one and done client, and I didn't hear anything. Well, last week they just sent me a text of a little pregnancy test that said pregnant. I was like, yes. And it literally was, it seemed like they were the opposite of embracing the moment. They were mentally time traveling back to all of the things that hadn't worked. And I was their last stop before in vitro fertilization, which is, a pretty expensive treatment to undergo. And thankfully they need it. And, it is a common thing that kids or parents, married people who want to have kids that can't, will sometimes adopt a child. And then in the adopting of that child, suddenly that releases whatever block was holding them back. And it's not that unusual that they end up with a child of their own shortly after the adoption.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I just wanted to discuss on the podcast.
That's a gorgeous story. Not too X-rated.
Nothing's too X-rated for the presence.
We got to get past the watershed first.
Well, anything else about process for this round?
Yeah.
I think to end it, I would just invite people when they feel a little bit off, our natural reaction is to seek comfort, to extricate ourselves from the situation that might be causing the anxiety, or go replace whatever you're doing now with a behavior that you like a little bit more. That's where a lot of addictive behavior starts to become part of our personality, part of our character. And instead of doing that, just play around with the idea of just exploring what's really going on inside of me right now, and create your own little process where you're interrupting this unending flow of thoughts that is being broadcast in our skull, it seems like 24/7, and start to pull on some of those threads and just, if you're angry or upset or feeling self-conscious, just explore what is it and who is it that is experiencing this self-conscious. And, if this is a lesson here on Earth School, what might this feeling that I'm experiencing now be asking me to realize or to be teaching me to witness? And I do realize I'm inviting a lot of duality into the process, but only for the purpose of, deconstructing and then reconstructing and doing it in a way that you're truly whole. Again, all part of the greater ocean of consciousness.
I
Yeah,
have
it's
a
a
sneaking
bridge.
suspicion that this comment is from Rosalie.
I have the
Me
same
too.
sneaking suspicion, Rosalie.
I think it's beautiful to, in any sort of presence conversation, this there's a constant invitation to and have a closer look at what's going on in each of us. So what's going on with you? What's happening in you? What are you trying to teach yourself? It's kind of an interesting question. I like to ask myself, what am I trying to teach myself by giving myself this experience? And when I ask that question, it also gives me the opportunity to own my, take responsibility for whatever my part is in any given situation. And that may include just being the observer of another situation and judging that situation without actually being in it and experiencing something about it. So the opportunity to learn something about myself and my experience of being in the world by asking myself that question. So that was my take on it. Any more? No?
Good for good.
Okay, how about, since we have a few
Yeah, I mean,
minutes, go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to really echo what you're saying, that, I think it is an art or a skill, this ability to really be with our experience in a way that truly meets it, where it is. There's so many little, like little resistances and things that show up, which of course is fine, because then the resistance becomes part of the experience and you just notice that. And so really there's nothing like, I mean, people have to kind of start slowly, because you don't want to get overwhelmed by whatever is happening inside of you. But really, with a little practice, I think anyone can get to the point where there's just nothing to be afraid of. Like, people are, and we have been conditioned to be afraid of our own experience, because it's too overwhelming, or because it means something about me, or because I'm afraid someone else is going to find out about this, whatever, and this vulnerability and all this. And so I'm not even necessarily talking about doing it publicly. I'm just saying the ability to be present. We'll find out there's nothing, literally nothing in there that can hurt us. In fact, just the opposite. The more that we can open to whatever is there, and I believe life has sort of our back in this, and that it's going to give it to us in the right dosage, But so as we open to this, we open. Really, what that is, as I, Byron Katie loves to say, it's just anything that we have an experience that we're resisting, that feels painful or whatever. It's just life showing us where we're not yet free. And so just open to it. If it's painful, good, open to it. If it's pleasurable, like sex, good, open to it. There's really no difference except the labels we give to it, So
Lovely. Beautiful.
I think that's the beauty of presence, in this regard, is being with it. I mean, we've talked about the ego, we've talked about conditioning, and whenever we're feeling anything other than comfortable in our body and in the feelings and the emotions that are arising, that's the opportunity. When we know it, to look for it. But
Yeah.
there's a piece kind of niggling in the back of my head around this practice that we do, or the art or whatever it is. There's something about building a tolerance for feeling the goodness of who we are.
Mm.
You talked about the guy scoring the goal and he's going around cheering and then he goes straight back to seeking. What's familiar and comfortable to us is our conditioning and our egoic way of being in the world. But as we focus in on our presence practices, we can become more comfortable with feeling our true being and build the tolerance for staying in that feeling more and more. I think that's a huge benefit for us. But as you said, Fred, it doesn't happen in flick of a switch. It's a practice and something to spend time with and work with.
That's just conditioning,
Well, there you go.
It's just a lot of
and make it all up. Yeah, we're always creating. It's just what are we creating for ourselves? And when we feel anything but good, then we know we're creating something that's not serving us, so there's something there to look at. What glasses do we have on?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Drop the thinking and create space.
Yeah.
How about drop
Mhm.
the thinking and space is there?
Always there.
Because it's like I get to notice it when I'm not thinking and putting thoughts in the way of
Always.
what is already there. Thanks for that, Rosalie. I'm assuming it's Rosalie. Well, we have a few minutes. What's going on, guys? What do you I know there's tons of stuff going on in Our Mindful Life, for example. Do you want to say something about that, Bobby, before we close off today?
Yeah, sure. Our Mindful Life is my group on Facebook where we talk about and explore these things. All of our Presence Posse podcasts eventually make it there. Sometimes we broadcast straight there. And I'm actually doing an interesting project. I have a process that I've taken 200 plus people through, and I've only ever done it one-on-one, working with one individual, very intensive, and dealing with whatever is showing up in the moment. And I'm exploring teaching this one to many, just for the purpose of expanding the reach, as well as my big dream is that someday every police station, every hospital, every jail, every corporation has got like a mindfulness champion in there. And this part of this project that I'm doing right now is creating what someday hopefully might be the training materials to train in-house mindfulness coaches at corporations and organizations and government facilities and everything else. So if you would like to be involved in that process, in Our Mindful Life, you can just send me a direct message, or there's a couple of posts I've got in there. And I've created an audio program. I think it's around 13 or 14 hours now and building. And if you would like to go through that, you can do that for free right now. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm simultaneously not only talking about this material, but also teaching myself how to deliver it this way to many people and not always in a one-to-one context. So Our Mindful Life on Facebook, and just shoot me a DM, say, tell me more about the project you're in, and I'll send you the info on how to do it. Fun project for the ones that are going through it.
Thank you very much. Sounds really
Thanks, Bobby.
cool. Jan, do you have anything you want to share?
I don't have anything specific right now.
Okay. Well, y'all,
That's what
there's
she likes
Jan's
to share.
information. You know where to find her. I've heard Jan work. I've sat beside Jan while she's working, and it is
Oh,
really
fun.
impressive. She knows her stuff. So
That's
now you know
fun.
where to find her.
I'm fully booked at the moment, thankfully. So
Yay!
I'm not running anything. Yeah.
Excellent. Fred?
Well, actually, I find myself with a couple of openings on my calendar right now. So nothing I like to fill them with more than people wanting to have conversations about all of this stuff that we're talking about. Not an intellectual conversation, but like come and explore it for yourself and how these principles and ideas actually make your life better, simply enough. And so I have space for a couple of people, and first conversation is always on me. So if somebody out there in the world would like to, take that leap, my contact is down there somewhere. Feel free to reach
Dr.
out.
Fred.
That's
Talk
me.
to the doc. Talk to the
How
doc.
about you, Miriam? What's going on in your world?
Well, thank you. I am actually working on a 1-year educational program, training program for coaches and therapists and counselors. It is a method that I have developed, and I've tested it and done research on it. So I will be launching that actually quite soon. But at the moment, I am taking people through a process called the Safe and Sound Protocol. And for those of you who have heard of Stephen Porges, you guys have heard of Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory?
Yeah, polyvagal theory, right.
Right. Yeah. So that's Dr. Stephen Porges. He has developed what's called the Safe and Sound Protocol. And what it is music that has been adapted to only be within the range of the spoken voice. So no extreme sounds outside of the range of the spoken voice. And when listening to that music over time, they call it filtered music, listening to that music over time, they have discovered that symptoms of anxiety, even social skills improve, symptoms are lessened, even digestive problems can be somewhat alleviated or even completely alleviated, because it trains the brain to regulate itself and to not begin to seek outside the normal frequency of the spoken voice. Because screaming, for example, or sirens or anything like that will be outside of the normal register. And when we're used to being hypervigilant and looking for those sounds, we don't relax. We're like this all the time, and we don't even notice because we're like that all the time and we're so used to being like that. So this gives people the opportunity, their autonomic nervous system, an opportunity to train to not react. And what will happen is, listening to the music, it sounds a bit weird, it sounds a bit hollow, but that's actually what it's actually correct. And your system will start reacting, and then it'll learn that, wait a minute, everything's fine. And over time, you don't need to have that reaction anymore. So I am actually offering this treatment in this package of 15 hours for the price of 12.
Cool.
So if anybody wants to try the Safe and Sound Protocol, and there's a reason it's called the Safe and Sound Protocol, it uses sound, and it also allows the autonomic nervous system to experience feeling safe. So you actually becomes more natural for you to feel safe, even in situations where you tend to not feel safe. And it's actually, I've done the protocol, and I'm actually running it again on myself, and it's absolutely fascinating how just listening to music can do things with you. But that's the whole training of it. So you are more than welcome to contact me for information about that. It's called the Safe and Sound Protocol, and the person who developed it is Dr. Stephen Porges, and it is very good for people with PTSD, for example, or anxiety or that sort of thing. Yeah. So thank you for that. And that brings us to the
I just
end of
finished his I just finished his almost exactly.
I just finished his, and then I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. Did you guys
Me
also
neither.
experience that it cut out?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Right again, Fred.
Yeah, maybe. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
On
Can
and
you hear me
off.
now? You can hear me now. I was just saying, I just finished Dr. Porges' recent book called The Brain's Way of Healing.
Yeah.
Which was quite good. Is that him or is that? I may be confusing him with the guy that does neuroplasticity, which is Deutges. Porges and Deutges are maybe two different people. So
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
because
Hang on, let
polyvagal
me.
and neuroplasticity are kind of connected too.
Yeah, it's
I think I
Deutsche
may have gotten those confused.
or Deutsch. Norman Deutsch.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Is the guy that you're that did this?
No,
Same
it's
guy?
The Brain's Way of Healing is Norman Deutsch.
Oh, that's different. Okay,
And
that's different.
right. And the polyvagal theory and the idea of the window of tolerance, people may have heard of that. That
Okay.
is Stephen Porges. Yeah.
That's
So
polyvagal.
actually, it's good that
Okay,
you mentioned that.
never mind.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's all good. So that was
It's
our presence and process talk for today. We will be back on the second Monday of October. So for those of you who've been following us for a while, we will not be weekly, at least not for a while. So the next time we get together and gather the posse will be the second Monday in October. And we will post information on that in our free Facebook group, The Presence Posse. So keep your eye out there. And I would like to thank Jan Hart, Bobby Cobb, and Dr. Fred Blum for today's talk and being with us. And all of you who have been watching and commenting, we appreciate your comments. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. And thanks from me as well. Bye for now, y'all.
Mm-hmm.